The first time my new neighbor caught me staring, I was holding a garden hose like an idiot and watering the same patch of grass for so long it was starting to look concerned. In my defense, I wasn't trying to be creepy. I was trying to figure her out. That sounds worse. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm 36, recently divorced, and apparently the kind of man who can survive a custody mediation, refinance a house, rebuild a deck, and still be completely defeated by a woman moving into the blue house next door. Her name was Claire Bennett. I learned that from the mailbox before I learned it from her. She moved in on a Saturday morning with one moving truck, two teenage-looking nephews who carried boxes like they were being punished by the court system, and a golden retriever who immediately decided my yard belonged to him on a spiritual level. I had lived on that street for almost 6 years. Quiet neighborhood outside Raleigh. Old trees. Front porches. People who waved even when they had no intention of stopping to talk. After my divorce, that quiet had become the main reason I stayed. My ex-wife took the condo downtown. I kept the house because I told myself stability mattered. What I didn't say out loud was that the house had become a place to hide. Work, dinner, laundry, lawn, sleep, repeat. It wasn't a bad life. It just had no surprise left in it. Then Claire arrived with paint on her jeans, a dog with no boundaries, and the kind of laugh that carried across a driveway without asking permission. She was probably 34 or 35. Brown hair usually clipped up badly. Warm eyes. The kind of woman who looked friendly until she decided not to be. And then you immediately understood she had range. For the first week, we only exchanged neighbor things. Your dog is in my hostas. I'm so sorry. He seems emotionally committed. He's going through a transition. Then, do you know which day recycling goes out? Tuesday night. Actual Tuesday or neighborhood Tuesday where everyone panics Monday at midnight? Neighborhood Tuesday. Then, your porch light flickers. I know. That sounded like surrender. It is. That got a smile from her. I thought about that smile later while fixing my own porch railing, which was ridiculous and not something I planned to admit in court or anywhere else. The truth was, Claire made the street feel different. Not because she was loud, because she was alive in a way I had forgotten people could be without performing it. She drank coffee on her steps at 7 a.m, with the dog sprawled at her feet. She painted her front door a deep green one afternoon and got a streak of it on her cheek without noticing. She carried boxes of old books inside and talked to them like they were difficult relatives. And yes, sometimes I noticed. Fine. Often. But I kept it contained. A glance from my yard. A quick wave. A casual comment while taking the trash out. Normal neighbor behavior from a man who had absolutely not started mowing his lawn in more careful lines since she moved in. The incident happened on a Thursday evening. It was hot. The kind of summer heat that doesn't leave when the sun starts going down. I was in my backyard watering the herb planters my sister had given me as a healthy coping mechanism, which was rude because the basil was doing better than I was. Claire was in her yard, trying to hang string lights along the edge of her patio. Trying was the key word. She had one end of the lights looped around a pergola post, the other tangled around her forearm, and the golden retriever, his name was Murphy, was proudly sitting on the extension cord like he had captured it in battle. I should have offered help immediately. Instead, I watched. Not for long. Long enough. She stretched up to hook the lights over the beam, lost the loop, caught it again, muttered something I couldn't hear, then turned her head and looked straight at me over the fence. I froze, with the hose still running. Claire's eyes dropped to the water pooling around my shoes, then lifted back to my face, one corner of her mouth curved. "If you want to look," she called, "just ask." The hose slipped slightly in my hand and sprayed my own ankle. Excellent. A dignified showing from all departments. I cleared my throat. I was looking at the lights. Were you? Mostly. Her smile widened. That is a very honest correction. I turned off the hose because at least one of us needed adult supervision. Do you want help? I asked. With the lights or with your staring problem? I looked at her. She looked back. Then she laughed, and the whole backyard seemed to loosen. With the lights, I said. The other thing appears chronic. Good to know. I walked over through the side gate because the fence between our yards was low enough to talk over but high enough to make climbing it look like a midlife crisis. Murphy greeted me like we had been separated by war. Claire handed me the tangled cord. He's useless. Murphy wagged his tail. He seems proud of it. He has confidence without evidence. Relatable. She gave me a quick look at that. Not amused exactly. Curious. That was the first moment I felt it. How easily she could shift from playful to perceptive. Like she heard the joke, but also heard the loneliness underneath it. I focused on the lights. Safer. We worked together for 20 minutes. I held the ladder. She hooked the strands. I untangled the cord. She told Murphy to stop trying to eat a zip tie. The sky went lavender over the rooftops, and one by one, the bulbs blinked on above her patio, warm and golden. Claire stepped back beside me and looked up. Okay, that's better. It is. She glanced over. Thank you. You're welcome. For a second, neither of us moved. The lights made her yard look softer than mine, less controlled, more lived in, a half-open paint can near the steps, a stack of books on the patio table, a dog toy under a chair, evidence of someone building a life instead of just maintaining one. Claire looked at me then and said, "Can I ask you something?" I almost smiled. After tonight, I feel like I should be nervous. You probably should. Go ahead. She leaned one hip against the patio table, arms folded lightly, eyes on mine. You always this careful, Jake? The question hit harder than it should have. Not because it was rude, because it was accurate. I looked away first, toward the new lights. Depends what I'm trying not to break, I said. Claire didn't answer right away. When I looked back, her expression had changed. Still playful, but softer now, and maybe a little dangerous. Well, she said quietly, for the record, I'm not made of glass. Before I could answer, Murphy barked, ran between us, and knocked over an empty flower pot like emotional sabotage was part of his training. Claire sighed. He disagrees. I laughed. A real one. The kind that surprised me because I had not heard it out of myself in a while. Claire noticed that, too. Of course she did. And when she looked at me again under those newly hung lights, I had the strangest feeling that my quiet little life had just developed a door I was either going to walk through or spend the rest of the summer pretending I didn't see. Claire ended up offering me a beer because, in her words, you saved the lights, and Murphy has no concept of gratitude. Murphy wagged from under the patio table, unbothered by the accusation. I should have gone home. It would have been the clean choice. Neighborly favor done, polite goodnight. Retreat to my side of the fence where I could continue pretending that watching Claire Bennett move through the world did not affect my pulse, in ways a grown man should probably have under better control. Instead, I said yes. So 10 minutes later, I was sitting in a metal patio chair under the string lights we'd just hung, holding a cold bottle of beer while Claire disappeared inside and came back with another one for herself and a bowl of pretzels. Neither of us touched much. The yard looked different at night. Softer. The green front door she'd painted looked darker under the warm lights. The dog toy was still under the chair. A half-unpacked box of books sat by the back steps. One of the titles on top was a gardening guide, which made me feel slightly better about the condition of my basil. Claire sat across from me first. Then, after Murphy sprawled across both our feet like a furry union agreement, she shifted to the chair beside mine. Not touching. Close enough. That, she said, looking up at the lights, is significantly better. I try to deliver dramatic transformation. You mostly delivered zip ties and emotional support. I contain multitudes. She smiled into her bottle. I'm starting to believe that. There it was again. That dangerous thing she did, where a joke somehow came out sounding like she meant more than the joke deserved. For a minute, we just listened to the neighborhood settle. A lawnmower in the distance. A kid laughing down the block. Crickets starting up along the fence line. The kind of summer evening that makes people stay outside longer than they planned to. Claire tucked one leg under herself in the chair and said, So, you always this careful, or did I just catch you on a heavily supervised night? I looked at her. We're going back to that. We never left it. Fair. I took a sip of beer and considered my answer. The easy version would have been another joke. Something light. Something that let me stay likable and unreadable. But Claire had already proven she could hear the difference between funny and evasive. So I said, "More careful than I used to be." Her expression shifted. Not pity, just attention. "That sounds earned." It was. She nodded once. No follow-up demand. No dramatic pause, waiting for me to perform damage. Just room. That made me want to fill it. "My divorce was finalized about 2 years ago," I said. "No explosions, no police reports. Just a slow death by disappointment and bad communication." Claire winced. "That's somehow worse. It had efficiency. I hate efficient heartbreak. You seem very against most forms of heartbreak. I'm pretty progressive that way." I laughed. She smiled, but her eyes stayed on me. "You have kids?" "No," she nodded again. "That probably made leaving easier. It made the paperwork easier." That line sat between us for a second. Then she said quietly, "Yeah, that sounds more true." I looked down at the label on my bottle. "What about you?" Claire leaned back in her chair, letting her head tip against it for a second before she answered. "Almost married," she said. "Did all the embarrassing pre-production, venue visits, spreadsheet tabs, one argument too many, then one honest conversation too late." I looked at her. She kept her eyes on the lights. "I left before the wedding," she said, which sounds dramatic, but really it was just delayed self-respect with a deposit attached. That got me smiling despite myself. She looked over and caught it. "What?" That was a very polished line for mild devastation. "I've had practice." There was a softness in her face now that hadn't been there in the yard earlier. Not fragility. Something more interesting than that. A woman who had broken one version of her life on purpose and was now figuring out what to build with the pieces. "That why you moved here?" I asked. "Partly." She took a sip of beer. "My sister lives 20 minutes away. I work remote most of the week, and I wanted a street where people still sit outside and wave and accidentally tell you their dog's medical history. That happens fast around here. Mrs. Hanley across the street told me about her beagle's digestive issues before she told me her first name." "That sounds right." Claire laughed softly. Then she looked at me again, and the mood tilted. "Can I tell you something slightly rude? Given the historical tone of this relationship, I'd be disappointed if you didn't." Her smile came back. "After the broken engagement, everyone got very gentle with me." Gentle? Careful. Soft voices. Loaded pauses. That look people get when they're trying to figure out whether a woman living alone means she's brave or sad. I knew that look. I had probably worn it more than once. Claire's voice stayed light, but only on the surface. I hated it. I hated feeling like people were responding to the emotional headline instead of the person in front of them. Something in my chest tightened. Maybe because I understood it. Maybe because I had been doing a version of the same thing with her. That carefulness she clocked in me, it wasn't only about my divorce. It was about seeing something I wanted and immediately trying to make myself smaller around it so I wouldn't have to risk wanting more. Claire tipped her bottle toward me. "That's why I said I'm not made of glass." I nodded slowly. I figured, "No, I don't think you did." Her voice softened. "I wasn't saying don't be kind. I was saying don't act like noticing me is some kind of offense." That landed hard because it named the exact thing I had been doing. I looked at her. "You think that's what I'm doing?" "I think," she said, meeting my eyes, "you're very aware of me, and I think you keep trying to make that awareness look polite." The neighborhood sound seemed to fall away a little. Murphy snored at our feet like a tiny tractor. I let out a breath through my nose and said, "You make that sound accusatory." "I mean it as an invitation to honesty." That was somehow worse. I looked away toward the lights because they were safer than her face. Then I heard myself say, "The truth is, Claire, I'm not very good at wanting things halfway." She went very still. When I looked back, her expression had changed again. Not playful now, not even especially soft, just open. That she said quietly. Sounds like the first real thing you've said to me. It might be. She took that in. Then she set her bottle down on the table, turned a little more toward me, and said, "Okay, then let me be equally honest." My pulse shifted. Claire held my gaze and went on. "When you look at me from your yard, Jake, I don't mind. I forgot the beer in my hand. I noticed," I said. "I figured. You called it out with admirable violence. I believe in efficiency." That should have broken the tension. It didn't, because she was still looking at me like she had decided halfway truths were boring. Then she asked, voice lower now, "Do you know what I've been trying to figure out?" I shook my head once. She leaned back just slightly, enough to keep the moment from tipping too fast, but not enough to make it safe again. "Whether you're staring because you find me attractive," she said, "or because you're trying very hard not to." And just like that, my quiet summer got much more complicated. I should have given her a clever answer. Something easy, something light enough to float us both back to safer ground. Instead, because Claire Bennett apparently had a way of making my survival instincts useless, I told her the truth. Both. Her expression didn't change right away. Just her eyes. They softened, sharpened, and somehow did both things at once. "Both," she repeated. "Yeah. You find me attractive. Yes. And you're trying very hard not to. Also yes." The corner of her mouth lifted, but it wasn't the teasing smile from before. This one was quieter, more careful, like she had asked a bold question and gotten a real answer sooner than expected. "Why?" she asked. That question was harder. Not because I didn't know, because I did. I looked down at Murphy asleep across both our feet. "Because I'm your neighbor." "That's the first reason?" "It's a practical one. It's a cowardly one wearing khakis." I laughed despite myself. "You are very hard to impress." "No, Jake." Her voice softened. "I'm very hard to distract." That was worse. Much worse. Because she wasn't flirting now. Not exactly. She was standing at the edge of something and asking if I planned to meet her there or keep organizing my excuses by category. I let out a breath. "Because I'm divorced. Because you're rebuilding. Because I'm tired of wanting something good and immediately calculating how it could go wrong." Claire looked at me for a long second. Then she nodded once, like that answer had earned a place at the table. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay means I believe you." She leaned back in her chair, but her eyes stayed on mine. "It also means I'm not accepting your application for permanent emotional retirement." That got a real laugh out of me. The kind that broke the pressure just enough for the night to keep breathing. She smiled too. Then, before either of us could say anything else, Murphy woke up, sneezed into my shoe, and wandered off toward the bushes with the dignity of a dog who had done his work. Claire watched him go. He has terrible timing. I think he may have saved us from ourselves. Maybe. She stood and picked up the empty beer bottles. Or maybe he just delayed the inevitable. The way she said that stayed with me long after I went home. I did not sleep well. The next morning, I came outside at 7 with coffee and found Claire sitting on her front steps with Murphy's leash in one hand and a cardboard box open beside her. She looked up and smiled. Not the full smirk. Something softer. "Morning, careful man." Morning, woman who interrogates neighbors under mood lighting. She lifted her coffee in acknowledgement. Everyone has hobbies. I was halfway across my driveway when a silver SUV pulled up in front of her house. Claire saw it and went very still. That was the first time I saw her warmth disappear completely. A man got out, mid-30s, polished, expensive casual. The kind of guy whose shoes looked wrong on a normal neighborhood street. He shut the door, glanced at my house, then at Claire, and gave her a smile that didn't reach anywhere useful. "Claire," he said. She stood slowly. "Nathan." So, the almost married one. I stopped by my mailbox because pretending to check the mail at 7 in the morning was apparently the level of dignity I had available. Nathan noticed me. Of course he did. He looked me over once, then turned back to Claire. "I found the last box from the storage unit." He opened the back of the SUV and pulled out a taped box. Claire did not move toward him. "You could have shipped it," she said. "I wanted to see the house. It's a house. It's a long way to move for a clean break. Her jaw tightened. I hated him immediately. Not because he had history with her, because he still thought he had the right to narrate it. Claire took one step down from the porch. Leave the box by the steps. Nathan laughed softly. Still doing that? Doing what? Acting like you don't care when you care too much. That was when I started walking. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough. Claire glanced at me once. A tiny look. Not asking for rescue. Checking whether I understood the difference. So I stopped near the edge of her driveway and said nothing. Nathan looked at me again. Neighbor? Jake, I said. He smiled. Right. Claire's voice went cold. Don't do that. Do what? Decide someone's importance before you know it. That landed on both of us, I think. Nathan's face changed. Just enough to show he hadn't expected pushback with witnesses. He set the box down near the steps. I wasn't trying to start anything. No, Claire said. You were trying to measure how far I got without you. The street went quiet. Even Murphy, traitor to all tension, stopped sniffing the azalea long enough to observe. Nathan stared at her. Then Claire picked up the box, held it against her hip, and said, I got far enough. For a second, I thought he might argue. He didn't. He got in his SUV and left with less dignity than he arrived with. Claire watched until the car turned the corner. I stayed where I was. Eventually, she looked at me and said, You can stop pretending that mailbox is fascinating. I looked down at the empty mailbox. Strong architectural presence. She laughed, but it came out uneven. I walked closer. You okay? No. Honest. Immediate. My chest tightened. She set the box on the porch and wiped one hand over her face. But I think I will be. That felt like the right answer. Not the easy one. The right one. I nodded. Do you want company or space? Claire looked at me for a long second. Then she held out Murphy's leash. Walk with me? So I did. We walked 2 blocks without talking. Murphy led like he had received military instructions. Claire kept her eyes ahead, one arm folded across herself. Finally, she said, That was the man I almost married. I gathered. And you didn't jump in. You didn't ask me to. She glanced over. Thank you. I nodded. A little farther down the sidewalk, she said, He always stepped in, not to help me, to own the scene. I looked at her. She kept walking. That's why last night mattered, she said quietly. You were careful, yes, but you were also listening. There's a difference. That sentence stayed with me longer than any flirtation could have. At the corner, Murphy stopped to inspect a mailbox like it contained secrets. Claire turned toward me. The morning sun caught her face, and for once there was no smirk, no shield, no easy joke. Jake, she said, I don't need you to rescue me from my past. I know. But I also don't want to keep pretending I don't like how it feels when you stand beside me. I forgot every reasonable thing I had planned to say. Then she stepped closer, right there on the sidewalk, and added softly, So the next time you want to look at me, maybe don't do it from across the yard. I looked at Claire on that sidewalk, Murphy's leash loose between us, and realized something uncomfortable. I'd spent 2 years telling myself I was careful, because careful was kind. But sometimes careful is just fear with better manners. Claire was standing close enough now that the morning felt less like a normal walk and more like a decision trying to happen in daylight. No string lights, no beer, no easy cover of night. Just her, me, a dog pretending to investigate a mailbox, and a sentence I could not safely laugh away. So the next time you want to look at me, she had said, maybe don't do it from across the yard. I took one slow breath. Then I said, okay. Her brows lifted a little. Okay. That is not your strongest line. I'm trying not to overcomplicate it. Historically unusual for you. Growth is possible. That got the smile I wanted. Small, real, still a little shaken from Nathan, but then I stepped closer. Not too much. Enough that she knew I had understood the invitation and wasn't going to pretend I hadn't. I like looking at you, I said. Claire's face softened. The words felt simple and almost embarrassingly direct. But maybe that was what we needed. Not some polished speech, not some over-explained confession from a man who had spent too long hiding behind responsible distance. Just the truth. I like the way you make the street feel less asleep, I said. I like that you talk to boxes of books. I like that you painted your front door green because you said the house needed a spine. I like that your dog has no boundaries and somehow more confidence than half the men I know. Murphy wagged once, as if accepting the tribute. Claire's mouth curved. He'll appreciate that. And I like you, I said. Not in a neighborly way. Not in a, you're pretty and new and my life is quiet way. I mean, I like the way you see things. I like the way you call me out. I like that when you ask a question, you actually want the answer. She looked at me for a long second. Then her voice came quieter. You really don't do halfway. No. Good, she whispered. I'm tired of halfway. That was the first moment I thought I might kiss her. Right there on the sidewalk. Morning sun, dog leash, someone's sprinkler ticking across a lawn 2 houses down. Then Mrs. Hanley stepped out onto her porch and called, Murphy looks wonderful today. Claire closed her eyes. Of course, I laughed under my breath. Murphy barked proudly. Mrs. Hanley waved like she hadn't just interrupted the most important moment of my post-divorce life and went back inside. Claire looked at me, trying and failing not to laugh. This neighborhood has no respect for pacing. Honestly, that may have saved us from becoming too dramatic near municipal landscaping. That would have been terrible for property values. We finished the walk, but something had changed. Not officially, not loudly, but the distance between us had stopped being neutral. When we got back to her house, Nathan's box was still sitting on the porch. Claire looked at it, then at me. I should probably open that. You want me to stay? She didn't answer immediately. Then she nodded. Yeah, she said, I do. Inside, her house still had that half-moved-in feeling. A few finished corners, a few chaotic ones, books stacked near the living room wall, paint samples taped beside the kitchen doorway, a framed print leaning against a chair like it had given up waiting to be hung. She opened the box on the kitchen floor. I stayed by the counter, close enough to be present, not close enough to make it mine. Inside were pieces of a life she had almost entered, a stack of wedding planning folders, a framed photo from an engagement shoot, a guest book sample, a small white envelope with her name written in Nathan's careful handwriting. Claire looked at the envelope for a long time. Then she laughed once. Not happily, not bitterly either, just tired. He kept all this, she said. Why? Because Nathan likes proof that something happened exactly how he remembers it. She picked up the framed photo. In it, she was smiling beside him. But even from where I stood, I could see the difference. Her face looked polished, composed, like she had learned the shape of happiness and was performing it well enough to pass inspection. Claire studied the photo, then set it face down. I used to think leaving meant I failed, she said. I didn't speak. She looked at the box again. But I think staying would have been the failure. That felt important. So I said, I think so too. She looked up at me. No joke this time. No defense. Just trust. Offered carefully. Then she reached for the envelope, opened it, and read whatever was inside. Her expression changed. Not heartbreak. Annoyance. Oh, he is unbelievable. What? She handed me the paper. It was a note. Short. Polished. Written like someone trying to sound wounded and superior at the same time. I hope this new life gives you whatever you thought I couldn't. I looked at her. Wow. Right? That sentence owns a linen blazer. Claire laughed so suddenly that she had to cover her mouth. It broke the room open, not because the note was funny, because she was finally laughing at something that had once had power over her. She took the paper back, folded it once, and dropped it into the trash. Then she looked at the photo, the folders, the wedding debris. I don't want this in my house. Then it doesn't stay, We carried the whole box to the garage. She didn't make a ceremony of it. No dramatic burning. No speech. Just one box placed on a shelf, marked donate. Shred. Never again. Which felt very Claire. When we came back inside, the house felt lighter. So did she. She leaned against the kitchen island and looked at me. Thank you. For what? For not making that bigger than it needed to be. I smiled. I'm learning your preferred scale of emotional support. Good. It's very specific. I've noticed. The air shifted again. Quietly, we were back where the sidewalk had left us. Only now there was no Mrs. Hanley. No mailbox. No dog pretending to be a chaperone. Murphy had abandoned us for a sunbeam near the back door. Claire looked at me. I looked at her. Then she said, Jake. Yeah? I don't want to be careful right now. My pulse moved hard once I stepped closer. Are you sure? She smiled faintly. That is a very you question. I can ask it in a cooler voice. No, she shook her head. I like that you asked. Then she reached out, not grabbing, not pulling, just touching 2 fingers lightly to the front of my shirt. Small contact. Huge consequence. I'm sure, she said. So I kissed her. Softly, at first. Carefully enough to give both of us a chance to understand it before it became something we couldn't take back. Then, Claire leaned into it. And the careful part didn't disappear exactly. It turned into certainty. When we pulled apart, she was smiling. Not smug, not nervous. Bright, in a way I hadn't seen from her before. Well, she said, that was much better than staring. I laughed, forehead almost touching hers. Good to know. It was still a little careful. I'm working on it. I noticed, then Murphy barked from the back door, apparently offended by the lack of attention. Claire looked over my shoulder and sighed. He's going to tell the whole neighborhood. Mrs. Hanley probably already knows. Definitely. We laughed, and that was the part that stayed with me most. Not just the kiss. Instead, Claire made coffee even though it was barely 10 in the morning. And I stayed in her kitchen while Murphy sprawled on the floor between us like a smug little witness. For a while, we didn't try to define anything. That was surprisingly nice. Claire showed me where she wanted to hang the framed print by the living room window. I held it up while she stood back, tilted her head, and said, higher. I moved it higher. No, too high. I lowered it. Now it looks insecure. I looked over my shoulder. The print? The whole wall. That feels like a lot to put on one nail. She laughed, and I loved how easy it felt to make her do that now that I wasn't trying to pretend I didn't want to. By noon, the print was hung. The empty box from Nathan was in the garage, and Claire walked me to the side gate with a smile she kept trying to hide and failing at completely. So, she said, leaning one hand against the fence, are we going to be weird now? Probably. Good. I'd hate for us to become emotionally efficient overnight. I smiled. Dinner? Her eyes warmed. Are you asking properly? I'm trying. Then yes, our first real date was 2 nights later. Not across a fence. Not under the excuse of broken lights or old boxes or a dog with boundary issues. Just dinner at a small Mexican place downtown where the tables were too close together and the salsa was dangerous enough to require a warning label. Claire wore a red sundress. I forgot how to speak for a second when she opened the door. She noticed. Of course she noticed. If you want to look, she said, you can still ask. I shook my head. You are never letting me survive that, are you? Absolutely not. The date went well. Better than well. It was the kind of night where silence didn't feel like failure and laughter didn't feel like performance. She told me more about leaving Nathan. I told her more about the version of myself that disappeared after my divorce. The one who used to say yes to things without immediately scanning for exits. Claire listened without trying to fix it. That mattered. After dinner, we walked by the river, and when she took my hand first, I didn't overthink it. That mattered too. For the next few months, our street became impossible to lie to. Mrs. Hanley saw everything. My sister noticed Claire's coffee mug in my kitchen and said, finally, the yard-staring era has evolved. Murphy began spending so much time at my place that Claire accused him of emotional betrayal. The best part was how ordinary it became. Sunday groceries, porch coffee, fixing her sticking bedroom window, her helping me choose paint for my guest room, and then immediately banning the color I liked because, apparently, sad oatmeal was not a valid aesthetic. We didn't rush. That was important. We were both old enough to know chemistry can be loud and still not be trustworthy. So we let trust get louder too. 6 months later, Claire's house stopped looking like she had landed there after escaping something. It started looking like hers. Deep green front door, lights over the patio, books finally shelved. Murphy's toys in every possible place except the basket made specifically for them. And my house changed too. Not dramatically. Just enough. A second coffee mug by the sink. Her sweater on the back of a chair. Dog hair on the couch I claimed to hate and secretly didn't mind. 1 year after that first night under the string lights, I asked her to move in. Not because we needed to prove anything, because one evening I watched her walk from my kitchen to her yard to grab Murphy's leash, then back through my side gate like the fence had become a formality, and I realized we had been living across 2 houses for no good reason except habit. Claire looked at me for a long second when I asked. Then she said, "Only if we keep the green door." "Your green door?" "Our green door." That was the answer before yes. We sold my house the following spring to a young couple who seemed nervous and hopeful in equal measure. I moved next door officially, which Mrs. Hanley called the least surprising real estate development in this neighborhood. 2 years after Claire caught me staring from the yard, I proposed under the same patio lights we had hung together. Murphy was there, wearing a bow tie and looking betrayed by fashion. Claire cried before I got through the second sentence. Then she said, "Yes." Then she said, "For the record, I knew you wanted to kiss me the night with the lights." I looked at her. "Then why did you wait?" She smiled. "Because you needed to ask." We got married in the backyard. Small, warm, imperfect. String lights overhead. Murphy trying to eat a boutonniere. Mrs. Hanley giving unsolicited commentary from the front row. My sister crying loudly and pretending it was allergies. And the strangest thing was this. I did not feel like my quiet life had been replaced. I felt like it had finally been opened. Claire didn't make me less careful overnight. She just taught me the difference between care and fear. And sometimes, years later, when I catch her painting something in the yard or reading on the porch with one bare foot tucked under her, she'll look up, catch me watching, and raise an eyebrow. If you want to look, she'll say, "Just ask." And I always do. What would you have done if your new neighbor caught you staring from the yard and called you out with one line that made it impossible to keep pretending? And have you ever had someone walk into your quiet life and make you realize carefulness had slowly become fear? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.